Have you ever felt a strange hollowness one morning, as if a piece of your essence was slowly vanishing? You reflect on the years spent dedicating yourself, making sacrifices, and supporting those you cherish.
Now, as life's seasons transition, a subtle question arises. After all my giving, what remains for me? Life is ephemeral, like morning fog ascending from a river, only to disappear with the sun's first rays. For years, you've poured yourself into family, relationships, and career. You've constructed, nurtured, and sustained, consistently prioritizing the needs of others. Yet, as years progress, you might find yourself at a juncture, questioning where that energy has dissipated and, crucially, who is reciprocating. Buddhism imparts a profound truth: clinging to expectations begets suffering. We anticipate love, loyalty, and care to be returned in kind. But the world often doesn't reciprocate. Younger generations are preoccupied, engrossed in their own challenges and aspirations. If you dedicate your later years seeking their approval, attempting to remain relevant in their rapidly changing world, you may become drained, disheartened, and even embittered. So, what's the solution? It's not seeking recognition or clinging to relationships that no longer fulfill you. The answer is simple yet profound: choose yourself, not from selfishness, but from wisdom. The moment has arrived to reclaim the energy you've freely given, to turn inward, to nurture your own spirit, and to embrace tranquility in solitude. This isn't an avoidance of life, but a return to your core self, to what genuinely matters. Ultimately, the greatest act of love you can offer the world is to first love yourself. The illusion of reciprocity pervades life. We invest in others, firmly believing that love, kindness, and sacrifice will eventually be repaid equally. We give with open hearts, anticipating our gestures of goodwill will initiate a cycle of return. However, as time passes, a sobering reality emerges: our efforts, regardless of their sincerity, aren't always mirrored. This reflects the nature of impermanence, or anicca, as the Buddha taught. Everything changes: relationships, people, circumstances. Bonds that once seemed deeply intertwined can unravel into distance and indifference. Imagine an elderly man, once the family's rock, the provider, the protector. In his youth, he labored tirelessly, ensuring his children had every opportunity he lacked. Late nights, early mornings, sacrifices big and small. His love was evident in every unspoken gesture. He assumed, perhaps naively, that when he needed them, they'd return the favor. Yet, as years passed, his phone rang less often. Family dinners he once hosted became infrequent, replaced by hurried check-ins and unfulfilled visit promises. He sits by the window, watching the world proceed without him, realizing that giving love doesn't always return as hoped. This illusion of reciprocity is deeply rooted in human relationships. We tell ourselves kindness breeds kindness. Loyalty ensures loyalty, but life's river doesn't flow predictably. It carves its own path, often diverging from our hoped destinations. Expecting others to reciprocate our giving creates a silent agreement we write in our minds, but nobody else has signed. Consider May, a woman who spent her life as her family's cornerstone. From youth, she cared for siblings, later dedicating herself to her husband, and ultimately pouring her soul into raising her children. She was always the go-to person in crises, the fixer, nurturer, and constant source of warmth. But as she aged, she found herself alone in a home that once resonated with laughter. Her adult children, with their own families, were preoccupied. She called often, but responses were brief, hurried. "I'll visit soon, Mom," they'd say. But soon never arrived. Initially, May was heartbroken, wondering what she'd done wrong, why the love she'd freely given seemed to vanish into nothingness. But through years of introspection, she grasped something profound. Attachment to expectation is the source of suffering. Love exists, but it doesn't adhere to the rules of fairness we impose. She had given out of love, and that was enough. Her peace didn't require reciprocation, but knowing she had loved unconditionally. Buddhism teaches that suffering arises from clinging to people, outcomes, and ideas of how things should be. Releasing this grasp liberates us. Love, like water, must flow naturally. Forcing it into a container of expectation stagnates it, turning it into resentment, bitterness, or sorrow. True generosity, bringing peace, is given without strings. Understanding this truth brings liberation. Instead of dwelling on what wasn't returned, one can shift focus inward. Give not expecting, but because it aligns with your being. Care for others not to secure future affection, but because it fulfills you in the present. When life shifts, when people drift, when love isn't returned as envisioned, meet it with acceptance, not pain. This doesn't mean resigning to loneliness or expecting nothing, but finding balance, cherishing present love, releasing longing for what's absent, and understanding each soul walks its path. Some will return, some won't, and that's simply life. Let love be like the wind, felt but not held. Let kindness be given freely, like sunlight warming without expectation. Above all, find peace not in what's received, but in the wisdom that giving itself is enough. Reclaiming your energy. Old age isn't a time to chase others or beg for recognition, but to reclaim what was freely given: energy, peace, and self-respect. For decades, you may have poured yourself into relationships, obligations, and responsibilities, giving endlessly, hoping the invested love and attention would return. But now, in life's twilight, a profound truth emerges: if you don't reclaim your energy, nobody will. This doesn't mean isolating yourself, but empowering self-prioritization. Recognize your well-being isn't an afterthought, but the foundation of a fulfilling life. Instead of seeking approval, attention, or validation from those preoccupied with their lives, turn inward. Ask yourself, what brings me joy? What have I neglected? What's still possible? Answers may surprise you. Perhaps you dreamed of painting, but life intervened. Maybe you postponed travel indefinitely. Or maybe it's simpler: porch sitting with tea, listening to leaves, existing without expectations, walking alone in nature, revisiting untouched books, practicing mindfulness, not as luxuries, but lifelines to your essence. Consider Mr. Hang, a retired teacher who shaped minds for 40 years. He gave wisdom, patience, and heart to students, sacrificing personal time. He assumed students, colleagues, and family would surround him with the same care. But life moved on. Former students built careers, children had lives, and the school replaced him. The realization struck: he'd given so much to others, forgetting himself. A friend suggested revisiting the violin, a childhood passion. Hesitant initially, he tried. The first weeks were frustrating, but slowly, miraculously, music flowed, imperfectly, but beautifully. He felt fulfillment he hadn't in years. Playing had no purpose but joy, and in that joy, he found himself again. Buddhism teaches samadhi, deep concentration and inner tranquility. Reclaiming energy is profound self-care, not indulgence or selfishness, but wisdom. Realize your well-being is as important as those you once cared for. Imagine a candle burned to the wick, flickering weakly after years of illuminating others. Without replenishing its flame, what light remains? Your energy, peace, and self are not limitless giveaways. They must be nurtured, protected, and restored. It's never too late to reclaim what's yours, to embrace solitude's quiet joy, to immerse yourself in creative pursuits, to release validation needs, and to recognize that this life, this moment, is yours to shape. The power of silence is often misunderstood in youth. People feel compelled to speak, explain, defend, debate, and prove their worth. They raise voices, believing words shape reality. But as one ages, a realization dawns. Most listen to reply, not understand. Conversations become battlegrounds where words are weapons, yet no one wins. Buddhism teaches speech should be measured and purposeful. Right speech, samavaka, is part of the Eightfold Path. It doesn't mean constant silence, but choosing words wisely, speaking only when necessary, when words serve truth and kindness. When they don't, silence is wiser. There's a story of an old monk, once a celebrated scholar, who spent decades debating philosophical concepts. One day, an arrogant student challenged him, speaking rapidly, trying to prove the monk's knowledge outdated. The monk listened, nodding, never interrupting. When the student finished, the monk smiled and said, "Thank you for sharing." Then he left. The student was stunned, expecting a rebuttal, but the monk offered no resistance. Over time, the young man learned the lesson in that silence: not every battle is necessary. Sometimes, the greatest wisdom is letting go. Picture an old man arguing with a younger colleague, trying to assert experience. The young man dismisses his wisdom, insisting times have changed. The old man could argue, but instead, he smiles and walks away, carrying his wisdom, needing no validation. That's the power of silence. In a world that values noise, constant notifications, opinions, and arguments, choosing stillness takes strength. The modern mind is conditioned to respond, react, and be heard at all costs. But silence is a discipline, a skill, and wisdom. It's the ability to listen without interrupting, to observe without correcting, to allow others their opinions without demanding agreement. An old Zen saying, "Do not speak unless you can improve the silence." How many frustrated or proud words improve the moment? How often do we regret angry or hasty words? True power lies not in how much one speaks, but in how much one understands without saying a word. Consider a mother and daughter arguing. The daughter, full of passion, accuses her mother of control. The mother, hurt, feels the urge to defend, but instead, she listens, letting her daughter speak. When she's done, the mother says, "I hear you." That moment of quiet acknowledgement does more than any lengthy defense. Silence paired with presence carries weight. This isn't to say silence is always the answer. Sometimes words must be spoken when injustice must be called out and truth defended. The difference is intention. Are words spoken from ego, from a need to be right? Or are they spoken with clarity and purpose? A wise person knows when to speak and when to remain silent. They understand silence isn't weakness, it's mastery over impulses. Some conversations aren't worth the energy, some arguments cannot be won, and the peace of mind from walking away is worth more than proving a point. Observing instead of interfering. We have a deep urge to correct, guide, and shield others from mistakes. It comes from love, earned through our own struggles. We see a child making a bad choice, a friend in a self-destructive pattern. We want to intervene, offer our wisdom so they don't suffer as we did. But wisdom given freely is rarely accepted. Most must walk their own path, stumble, and learn through experience. Pain is a teacher, struggle is a sculptor, carving away ignorance and illusion, shaping the soul. Stepping in too soon robs someone of growth. A caterpillar must struggle out of its cocoon to strengthen wings. Peeling it open prevents the butterfly from flying. Anand watched his father gamble away their wealth. He pleaded, presented logic, and sought help, but his father was unmoved. Anand made a difficult decision: he let go. Instead of controlling his father, he focused inward, working harder, building a secure future. When his father hit rock bottom, he sought Anand not for money, but for understanding. Only then was he ready to listen. This is detachment, not abandonment, but trust that the universe unfolds as it should, that people must experience their own lessons. Seeing a storm coming doesn't mean pulling others inside. Sometimes they need the rain to understand why shelter matters. Detachment isn't indifference, it's loving without possession, caring without control. Focus not on changing others, but on our own peace, actions, and responses. Imagine holding a bird, squeezing crushes it, holding it loosely allows it to stay or fly, but either way, it's free. The old fisherman watched young men struggle against the current. He wanted to warn them, but knew some lessons must be learned firsthand. So, he remained silent, and they eventually learned to swim more skillfully or respect the river's force. Intervening would have prevented their wisdom. Not everything needs our interference, not every battle is ours. There's an art to stepping back, allowing life to be without our constant shaping. True wisdom is knowing when to speak and when to be silent, when to help and when to step aside. Next time you want to correct or fix, pause. Ask, am I doing this for them, or for my discomfort with their struggle? If the latter, let go. Focus on what you can control, your energy, journey, and peace. At the end of the day, the only person you truly have the power to change is yourself. Letting go of the need for approval. A major source of suffering is the need for approval. From childhood, we seek validation, praise, acceptance, and love. This craving seeps into every aspect of life: how we dress, careers, relationships. People spend years shaping actions based on others' perceptions, fearing rejection and craving acknowledgement. As life progresses, a crucial question arises: why am I still trying to prove myself? Lila spent her life seeking approval. As a girl, she was obedient. As a wife, she sacrificed her dreams. As a mother, she put her children first. Alone in her 60s, she realized she never truly lived for herself. Every decision was made for someone else's approval. She wondered, who am I when no one is watching? No amount of validation brings lasting peace. Chasing approval gives power away. Buddha taught happiness comes from understanding oneself, not being understood. Imagine a traveler carrying a heavy sack of others' opinions. Each step is burdened. Setting the sack down brings relief and the realization the journey could be easier. This is freedom from releasing the need for approval. Letting go isn't indifference or isolation, it's redefining worth. It's asking, do I like who I am? Do I live according to my values? It's shifting from outward validation to inward acceptance. Anand, a businessman, sought recognition, built wealth, and climbed ladders, but felt hollow. Leaving his career for a simple village life brought freedom. He wasn't performing, he woke with the sun, worked with his hands, and found joy in small things. When asked if he missed prestige, he said, I have nothing to prove, and that is my greatest achievement. The need for approval is an illusion, a mirage. Approval is fleeting, dependent on others' whims. Self-acceptance is unshakable, the foundation of peace. Great masters retreat into silence, not seeking applause, but finding contentment. Releasing the need for approval takes practice, patience, and introspection. It requires courage to say, I am enough, even when the world disagrees. It means standing firm in one's truth, even against expectations. It's choosing authenticity over acceptance, peace over performance. Ask, what would my life look like without seeking approval? What choices would I make? Then walk in that direction. The only person whose approval you need is your own. Conclusion: choosing yourself. The greatest act of self-respect is recognizing personal well-being is a necessity. For too long, we've been told prioritizing ourselves is selfish. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Your body, mind, and soul need care. When was the last time you checked in with yourself, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually? When did you last sit in silence and listen to your thoughts? Life sweeps us up in obligations, but you're being called to return to yourself. You owe no one an explanation for choosing peace. You don't need permission to prioritize yourself. Happiness is claimed. Let go of resentment and expectations. Allow yourself freedom to step fully into your presence. You've spent years sacrificing to fit others' needs. Now this chapter is yours. Nurture your well-being, cultivate joy, and embrace contentment. There's quiet strength in choosing yourself out of love for who you've become, for the journey you've walked, for the life ahead. The river of life flows forward, so must you. Not chasing validation, but moving with the ease of someone who knows peace is cultivated within. Breathe deeply, lift weight from your shoulders, and step into your next chapter with grace and self-respect. Your happiness isn't up for debate, it's yours to own.
Samasun, if this resonated with you, consider subscribing. Here, we find wisdom, peace, and strength. Let's continue this journey toward fulfillment, where you're choosing yourself. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourself, because you are worth it.